Hello everybody, I'll be doing a special edition of the 40K show today, where I will be doing a reading of the first short story in my series of short stories called Dust and Rubble. I hope you enjoy. Delta Sniper Riled Riggins had been waiting for 4 days to make the kill. The overgrown city on the planet of Karkatha, known as Eildon, had once been the third largest city on the planet. While it paled in comparison to the central metropolis located on the coast of the supercontinent, this island city had access to vast regions of space, available for farming and crops. The vast mineral wealth of the city of Rubble, and the cavernous mining facilities located around it, was what supported the economical infrastructure of Karkatha. However, the more glamorous and less filthy life of the metropolitan district made Rubble, in terms of population, the second largest city. Those who didn't care for manual labor made themselves businessmen or shop owners, taking the supplies from Rubble and Eildon and selling them to the population. What metal that wasn't sent to the nearby forge world of Rubble mine was used to the fullest extent. One could even argue that metalwork had become an art form on Karkatha. The sniper drifted warmly, as fond memories of a metal shop in Rubble, owned and run by his father, flowed effortlessly from his thoughts. Riggins shook the distraction, banishing the pawing remnants of memory from his idle mind as he caught motion down in the city. For Sergeant First Class Riled Riggins, it had taken 2 days of restless, high-danger, foodless travel through enemy territory. When Rubble had been taken by the Chaos invaders as they broke upon Karkatha like a wave, massive military action had been undertaken to reclaim it. The honest workers there would have been quickly tainted and forced into labor for the Chaos. Using the limited factory supplies and the massive amount of metals in the mountainous region, the Chaos forces would have been able to restock and refit their forces even while in the midst of the final stages of their campaign. For Eildon, however, the people had not been so lucky. There was no military asset to be gained by taking the city so immediately. Maybe more mindless, untrained cultists could be recruited, but nothing that couldn't be dealt with by use of minimal military effort. However, now that winter was beginning to set in, the predictions estimated that this winter would prove to bring incredible coldness. The Karkathan military had decided it prudent to try and find the fur stockpiles the city had been about to process when the Chaos attacked. The military government that had taken the place of the collapsing planetary system also needed a place to house the incredible amounts of refugees that flocked to military bases and outposts. They made such places horribly obvious and ripe for Chaos attacks. In the city, they could all be controlled and defended by minimal military presence. But this led to that, and that led to the other, and the other led to the latter, and the latter to the former, and here was Delta Force Sniper Riled Riggins, tired, hungry, worn, but ready to accomplish his mission. That was what he was trained to do, designed to do. He was the best that Karkatha could offer, and was outfitted with the best weapons and the equipment a planet of a forge world could afford. Riled decided to make a mental checklist, for the umpteenth time, to make sure that he couldn't have been tracked, followed, or found out. Just over 4 days ago, Riled had been riding in a Valkyrie transport, Beta 2-3. He had been alone in the passenger hold, checking his equipment for one last time, though he was sure it was all in order. It was standard procedure. Gazing at the same fiery red sun that rose on the horizon, the one that he saw now, sitting in a hollowed-out skyscraper in the middle of the city. The intercom squawked on, telling him that the drop zone was about 5 minutes away. The sergeant reached up, keyed the acknowledgement signal to the pilot, and the flyer entered a westward bank, turning Riled away from the warm morning sun. Just on schedule, the Valkyrie banked once more, and now the sergeant could see the blue shadows on the dark city, the golden streams of light cast through the towering buildings, and the burnt-out or abandoned remnants of normal life entwined with the upgrowth. The flyer had leveled off and entered V2OL mode, and began a shallow vertical descent. Landing in a small park with an old, rusty children's roller coaster, the sergeant leapt from the jet as it hovered a few meters from the ground. The sergeant landed, rolled, and checked his gear with a quick glance before signaling up to the pilot. The pilot nodded, gave him a thumbs up, and pulled the jet up quickly, accelerating into the heating air of dawn. The sergeant nodded to himself, checked again to fasten all of his equipment, and started toward the objective building. He had looked at the diagnostics map before making the journey with the acting CEO of Delta, as well as a number of his fellow elite Delta operators, and they had all determined the best place from which to take the shot. A tall building, once a communications and trade management and documentation building, proved to offer an excellent view of the projected target meeting point. The target, the leader of a chaos force in the city of Ioden, would be meeting with the second-hand man of the enemy commander in Rubble. The messenger would deliver a few words, a few pieces of information concerning Imperial forces' movement throughout the area would also be exchanged, and maybe an agreement to give some of the wool and fur stockpiled in the city to keep the cultists and warriors warm and able during the course of the campaign. The idea was that the sniper would take the shot, kill the target, and fade back into the woodworks to be extracted at a preset LZ when radio confirmation for evac was called. Despite the fact that Ryle wore a ghillie suit, the finest Karkatha had to offer, and the fact that he had spent upwards of an hour attaching local shrubbery, adding local colored dirt clods and such like to his camouflage, there were times when he felt horribly exposed. Granted, he had 3 days to move a little under 2 miles. In normal circumstances, he would have been able to cover the distance in under an hour easily, depending on how harsh the undergrowth was. However, when crawling through heavily enemy-infested territory, circumstances changed. Every now and again, Riggins would pass by a few patrols, and would let them pass for the most part. However, the closer he stalked towards the objective, the more heavily occupied the enemy territory got. The first major encounter occurred about a mile off of the target building. A large group of enemy units, including a captured Chimera APC and about 5 cultists escorting, appeared to be heading right for his position. The sniper had immediately looked around for some cover, likely a thick patch of shrubbery or a particularly heavily hit, burnt-out car. Nothing of any real merit was near. Moving incredibly slowly as to avoid detection, the sergeant had shifted himself silently over into a building, and hid below a window as the group passed. He could hear the cultists breathing, and the crunch of their boots made over the rubble. He waited for 15 minutes after the last sounds died out, and ventured to look. The enemy unit had moved on, and Ryle stalked back out, still relying on the shadows. After he was sure all enemy activity had ceased, he kept moving. He stayed tuned in after that. He had been far closer to being found out than he would have liked. He heard every sway of his ghillie grass, every gallop of wild animals in the side streets, and every bird that took flight from empty building drain gutters. The ghost town was going to be hard to repopulate. He could only imagine the horrible acts of violation and murder that had occurred here in the city. When the Chaos Forces met any semblance of resistance to join their ranks, they horribly butchered and defiled the offenders. Ryle knew he wouldn't want to live in a building where an entire family had been murdered. When the dried carcasses of victims began to appear on totems deeper into the city, the enemy activity picked up. It was almost as if the horrible things were signs, warning to those who entered about what lied within. Many convoys of the type of the first one he saw appeared regularly. At its worst, a half-mile from the target building, the sniper was forced to come to a crawl for the rest of the way. It was then especially that the sniper cursed the thin-spread military forces. He would have given anything to get a fellow sniper in with him. Sleeping shifts, an extra pair of eyes and ears, someone to communicate with. The feelings of hopelessness were drowned out by the training, but he would have killed for some company. The undergrowth was, thankfully, thick in our city. He could crawl as much as possible undetected, and would stop all movement and melt into the land when enemy units came too close. The largest convoy he experienced moved right over him.